How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to Lawbeck. I'm your host, Sam Brabham, and on this week's Friday Drive, we have this stunning 2015 McLaren 650S. First up, we're going to talk about the exterior of the car, and it's very, very typical McLaren. You would have seen a few McLarens that we've driven over these Friday drives, and you know how much of a fan I am of them. This one in particular, the 650F's got this beautiful grey, but I love, and you'll see this throughout the car in different elements, is this yellow accents through the front end here on the splitter. You've got the accents on the decals there, and even as you walk your way around on the brake calipers as well, that yellow accents, and it's also on the interior, which we'll see in a moment. One thing I'm a huge fan of is the front headlights here. The shape of it, just that angular feeling. The front splitter they changed, which we're going to go into a little bit more detail in comparison to the MP12C, which this car is derived from. So you'll see some similarities, but that front splitter actually generates about 24% more downforce, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail as we go along. As we make our way further around the car, I love the carbon accents on the bottom here. You've got the 650S signification. Obviously, we love McLarens, but also we love it for this reason too. There's something about getting into a car and opening the door upwards rather than outwards that I just absolutely love. Making our way further around here to the rear end, we've got the active DRS rear wing as well. It does pop up and down only a little bit, but it does make a bit of a difference, and same thing. We'll talk about that on the drive a little bit more detail. I've driven some of these on the circuit, and this actually makes a really big difference. And all the way into the back here, we've got on the diffuser the yellow accents as well, which I absolutely love. And you see the McLaren logo there. That's the same shape as those front headlights, which is pretty awesome too. Moving to the interior of the car now, and the first thing I wanted to sort of glaze on was we saw the yellow exterior accents around the car, and you can see how it's transitioned into the interior. The double stitching on here, the yellow piping on the seats, and the comfort of that Alcantara sort of finish, and the signification of the McLaren at the top there is pretty awesome. And even onto the top of the roof lining, all on the doors, that Alcantara leather is just such a nice feel, and it's everywhere, extended on the dash at the front here as well, and all on the steering wheel. But I love the fact that it's got the carbon option on the sort of inside of the wheel bearing here, and that fixation. I'm a huge fan of the carbon all the way through the center console as well. It's such a comfortable feeling, and we'll go through the drive modes in a little bit, but we spoke about the last time how comfortable these cars are, and the seats, the way you sit in them is really comfortable. The steering wheel positioning is really nice, and it's just everything feels premium and quality, and that's what I love about McLarens themselves. Let's talk a little bit about the engine specs. Now, we've got a 3.8 litre V8 engine, very similar in its core to the MP12C. The 650S was derived from the MP12C. That sort of first birth back into road cars for McLaren, and then leading towards 2015 with these cars, with the 650S, you can see the similarities in a lot of ways. They updated the interior an awful lot, and you get that feeling from the car with the ergonomics of the way we're sat, but also just the quality that they've used. They really took it up a notch after the MP12C, but also the engine, the chassis is very, very similar. Just minor tweaks, slightly lighter, a little bit more power, slightly different in its essence and the way it delivers its power, but at its root core, it's really a car that was an evolution of the MP12C rather than necessarily a brand new car in itself. Utilizing the 3.8 litre V8 engine, top speed of about 333 kilometers an hour, which is quoted by McLaren, producing 641 brake horsepower and 650 PS, which obviously is standing for 650S. And that's an awful lot of power to the weight that they've managed to change. The carbon fiber monocoque is a fantastic addition, not just for the lightweight nature of it, but also for the handling of the car as well. I've been lucky enough to drive a lot of these cars on the circuit, and they're so incredibly impressive, and you wouldn't believe how fast they are. The amount of times I've sat in the passenger seat of one of these things with an owner, and we're doing 250 plus and the thing's still climbing. Like, it's not even plateaued yet down the straight, and you're thinking this thing is so quick, and they're so much fun to drive. They're well balanced, and they take a lot of the technology out of the Formula One program into the road cars, and you can see that with the way that they do it, not just from the carbon fiber perspective, but also the active suspension that they have in this vehicle, and also the DRS styled wing that we have on the rear as well. Utilizing that 3.8 litre V8, the engine allows the car, with its lightweight nature, to go from 0 to 100 Ks in 3 seconds, and then 0 to 200 in about 8 seconds. It's so impressive. Even those numbers are mind-blowing. 3 seconds from 0 to 100 is incredibly impressive. Speaking of the lightweight nature of the 650S, our curb weight is about 1,400 kilos, which for a car that's not small in its nature shows how many lightweight materials they use. Even you look at the wheel that I'm using here, it's got carbon fiber, you've got the carbon fiber monocoque. There's so many additions to this car that make it lightweight, and I use that word specifically, additions, because it's not like they've just stripped the thing back. There are additions to the car from the MP12C, as an example, that add to the vehicle, whether it's more parts, different spacings. You feel like you're in a complete vehicle. It's not been stripped out, but the nature of the materials that are being used, particularly with that sort of F1 grade carbon fiber, makes this car so light. And that's coupled with that engine performance, which allows the car to be so fast from 0 to 100, from 0 to 200, but also so impressive around a racetrack as well. I love that as I'm sat in the car, I feel like I'm on top of the front of it. You know, you sit quite far forward in essence. As I head around this dude here, you sit quite far forwards in the vehicle. It feels like it anyway. I've been lucky enough to have driven these cars so much on a racetrack, and there's something always quite impressive about McLarens. You can see how their Formula One technology is transitioned from the race cars, and then obviously to their GT program as well. From there onwards, it starts to transition into the road cars and how impressive these things are. You can see how incredible the Senna and the P1 are. All of that transitions throughout the whole range, and even to the 650S, which is quite early in the piece if you think about it. You know, it's nearly 10 years ago that this car came out. It's so impressive. If this came out today as a brand new car, you wouldn't think twice. You wouldn't think that its age was at a certain point, and the technology and how much it's advanced, because it was at the absolute pinnacle of performance, structure, what these cars are capable of. And also, as I'm sat here in comfort mode, on a daily basis, they're incredibly comfortable too. As I cycle through the modes here, now you press the active button, that's going to activate the aero. That rear wing is now up. I can see it in my rear view mirror. It's those little elements that you get everything that you want from these cars. You drive some supercars and it's like it's either super comfort or you have to be on a racetrack to enjoy it. Whereas this, you get that element of everything mixed into one, where you can have it segmented if you want, but at the same time you can have a little bit of extra if you want it, and then go full bore. So into track mode, the thing's going to really activate that traction control, that ESP, that stability control is going to be limited a little bit. You can adjust how much slip you have on the slip angle, but also the suspension starts to stiffen up, the steering gets a little bit heavier, and that performance from the engine, you get everything all at once. And that is what, you know, particularly when you're on a racetrack, and I can feel it and hear it almost, how much more delivery of power I'm getting, even just in a short space of time. That responsiveness of the throttle comes in so much quicker. I don't know if you can hear it, it actually sounds louder as well in first gear, because it's just revving that a little bit higher as we go. I'm going to turn it back to comfort mode now, because I want a nice general experience as I'm driving into the city here. But it's one of those things that I love about it, because you just get the best of both worlds, and sometimes that's really missing from a lot of, particularly supercars. You know, you don't get that mixture of abilities when you're driving, whereas with these, even to the year that this was made, 2015, you get that. And I think that's really, really important for supercars nowadays, because people want to drive them. People want to have the experience of a track car, but also drive it on the road every day as well. And I feel like you get that. You've got plenty of space in the front, which is, I guess, a frunk, a lot of people call them. And there's a lot of space in the passenger seat. And I drove one of these, well, it was 720 actually, to Adelaide for a customer. Me and a friend spent 8.5, 9 hours driving this thing, and we got out and felt fresh. Whereas a lot of supercars, if you drove that length of distance on a road that isn't particularly smooth, you'd feel like your back's gonna go, and there's you know, you're going to feel uncomfortable, but actually I could do it all day. It was a real testament to the comfortability and quality of these cars. And then we drove that car on track at the Bend Motorsport Park, and you were just blown away by how impressive it was. And I think it's a testament to what McLaren do to give you that availability and to give you that best of both worlds feeling as you're driving the car in whatever situation you're going to be driving it in. And that's it for this week's Friday drive here at Lorbeck. I've had so much fun driving this car, and I do really enjoy driving McLarens. It's hard not to when they drive as well as this thing does. Make sure you subscribe to our content on our YouTube channel, follow us on Instagram as well, and let us know which car you'd like to see us Friday drive next, and we'll see you next time.